In 1982, a Turkey migrant begun a kindergarten close the Berlin side on a patching of East Deutsche earth. Osman Kalin ferociously protected his little domain of any authorities who tested to get it off. Although he dead the year, his household are yet looking following the story and the wood building he constructed down there. While I was 17, my top high school art tutor showed us renowned buildings, accounting their historic importance, remembers Osman Kalin's granddaughter, Funda. They showed us the Eiffel rig one week, and the following 1 week they showed my grandpa's wood building. This boy's in the grade done fun of it since it looks a bit fun and deformed, and creature a adolescent. I was fully mortified. My boyfriend was on to show how it was my grandpa who constructed it, while I shooting her a C to close her upwards. But how was 16 year back? Now Funda says she is very proud of which her grandpa constructed. The kindergarten Osman Kalin created stands on the boundary of Mitte, before East Berlin, and Kreuzberg, before Western Berlin. Contemporary office space blocks and top-rise flats now encircle the Grow kindergarten and topsy-turvy building that is adorned in graffiti. Its mismatched furnishings cement to the story. But of 1961 to 1989 the Berlin side separated the region, fleeing on one of the kindergarten's 3 sides. In reality, it was the create of the side how driven the kindergarten in life. Night in August 1961 specific posts were set in the land and beaded along in prickly cable. Time gunman guard begun patrol the east party in assault dogs. But the building workers cut corners. Formally, the boundary among East and Western Berlin tracked a order corner close a arched road named as Bethanendum, but the side went direct through, outgoing a delta of East Berlin on the west party of the side. It remained though while the cable fencing became a fastened dual side in a mined and tripwired die stripe in among. The intended how no could use the 350 SQM story of earth. The Western Deutsche by the government didn't own it, and the East Deutsche by the government couldn't get to it. Quite quickly, the residents in the west neighborhood of Kreuzberg began to use the region as a nonsense end, price dumping old bits of furnishings and wash their cars down there. The enormous heap of nonsense sat down there for almost too many decades before Osman Kalin, a building employee of Yozgat in center Turkey, excited in the neighborhood in 1982. Newly retired, he was looking for a draft to hold his period. But which? Of his plane he could see the thorn of the nonsense dumping and solve to begin down there. He took it on oneself to precise up all the nonsense, and put a kindergarten. He fair requested some time to increase several vegetable culture, says Funda. He had the rural area mind, Funda says. He had leftward over a big building and earth in Yozgat, in Donkey's Walkabout, and down there he was cooped up in and flat. He very requested to get out and go about. Kalin treated of sunrise to twilight on his new draft. His woman, Fadik, had to go downward of their plane in meal to recall him to take. He put harvest trees, peaches, apples, as so as his bracket cereal, garlic cloves and onions. By later the East Deutsche boundary had gunman the side. It was overall to listen soldiers patrol it in their dogs and to see them in the watchtowers looking above it in Western Berlin. 2 weeks following Kalin begun dig up the kindergarten, the East Deutsche boundary guard came to trip him to see which he was up to, and to do certainly he wasn't tunneling. While they saw how he was just start a kindergarten they permitted him to use the earth, provided how he remained 3m, 10FOOT, of the side. Quickly following how trip, the Western Berlin police force close Kalin, needing how he go off the earth. Deity gave me the earth, he shouted. I'm not frightened of you, thou'll include to murder me up you can include my kindergarten. The East Berlin guard monitored the exchanging of a neighboring watchtower. They could see he was very irritating the Western Berlin authorities, so to irritate them though more than, the East Berlin authorities done certainly how Kalin had complimentary and complete use of the earth. The kindergarten lay at one of the thinnest points of the die stripe, importance how lot tube and flea attempts were done. 2 times Kalin saw human beings get shooting. The East Berlin guard became utilized to his present. Each night it was portion of his usual to wavelength to them in the watchtower. He as well gave them onions. Every year the guard wrote him Yuletide cards, and occasionally they gave him a bottling of red wine. My grandpa was a pious Muslim, so he didn't sip. He didn't aware how my dad would sip it instead of, says Funda. He was very amiable to everyone. He didn't thoroughness if you were a man meeting at the top of the side, or a Western Berlin police force official. If you requested to include garlic cloves, tea, or several baklava, he guessed you to the kindergarten. Down there were college students who would go and do their homework assignment down there. In the 1980s down there was a enormous option stage in Kreuzberg, and the anarchism punks in the neighborhood respectable Kalin. They would go and sit in my grandpa since they mind he was very cold, against establishment, fight in governments for the kindergarten. My grandpa named them his soldiers, and told they would defend him and his kindergarten. It was wonderful to view, says Funda. They named him Lion, Love, Lef, since he was so powerful and quarrelsome. In 1983, the year following he took above the earth, Kalin constructed a barn, and slow a couple-story wood building began to get form about a wood in the medium of the kindergarten. It is completely attached, in power and fleeing water supply, a dormitory and a research. It became named as the treehouse on the side, Das Baumhaus and Demauer. Funda remembers a infancy of summer barbecues in her grandpa's kindergarten. He ever had crisp onions and garlic cloves in his hands, it was love his season with salt and paprika. He wouldn't begin consuming before the onions were on the spreadsheet. Consuming onions, I curse thee, is why he lived to be so ancient. We use onions and garlic cloves so lot in turkey meal, and the entire neighborhood, all the turkey lady came to ask him for crisp material. He done the kindergarten a slight bit greater and begun to sell them at a road marketplace. I recall my grandpa adopted such infant bag things, you aware wherever you belt a infant to yours front line? He imbued it in his onions and transferred them love his babies to the marketplace each 1 week. In the start, Kalin driven water supply of his plane to water supply his vegetable culture, transport 2 glass in every brush. But the proven to be very intensive, so while he found an old pump by a neighboring chapel, he took water supply of down there. Yet, there was not any old pump. It was one of the Landesbrunnen, portion of Western Berlin's disaster potable water supply reserves. It is illicit to get water supply of them, and Kalin ultimately got trapped. The penalty was €600, 530 pounds. As Kalin's Deutsche wasn't nice quite to circulation versus the penalty, his child, Mehmet, took it on oneself, as Funda found after while she came through a handwriting email of her dad to the officials. It told, "Hello, I am really sad since you say to my dad, he is a burglar. I'm really irate and sad you say to my dad, not tip a thing in his lifetime. He mind he was okay to get several water supply, for his vegetable culture, no cash to pay thou, appreciate you so lot Mehmet Kalin." Surprisingly, it treated. I couldn't trust how the Deutsche authorities saw the email and they fair waived the penalty. I could include helping my dad compose a email in ultimate official Deutsche, typed up, and they perhaps would include compressed the penalty in any case, but there they fair let him away. In 1989 the Berlin side came downward. Berlin was one town, Germany one nation once again. Kalin's kindergarten was now abruptly behind in Mitte, quite rather than Kreuzberg. By later, Kalin was a regional character, an old man named for departure versus governments, making which he requested and receive off in it. Human beings thick felt how he incarnate Kreuzberg's ghost. But in Mitte no knew who he was, they saw him just as a squatter with social area. The Mitte justice solved to expel Kalin, but while the human beings of Kreuzberg found they rallied in supporting, in key assist of the chapel of St. Thomas following doorway. This priest's helping us compose letters to the justice, Funda explains. This chapel stipulated a paper of the 1780s, an old map to show how the kindergarten was on chapel earth, that gave them the order to say how Kalin was permitted to use their earth. The paper was more than rather than a age ancient, and perhaps would not include detained up in trial, but the reality how the society protested done the justice pay focus. In the late, the justice formally DDDW the boundary on wherever the Berlin side utilized to work, driving the kindergarten of the area of Mitte in the area of Kreuzberg, its religious and, currently ever, geographic household. Kalin dead in April, elderly 96. As his ram unsuccessful in the recent 10-year of his lifetime, he became more than testy, but on nice days Kalin weakened in his kindergarten. His child, Mehmet, now tends to it, and Funda uses the crisp onions and garlic cloves as product composition for her modern turkey meal industry. Above the year, the Kalins include discarded lot giving to buy the earth, not how it is theirs to sale. But as its importance increases, developers may be stronger to staff away. Kalin's fight ghost appears to include provided a slight angle of story, but down there was one fight he could not win, in environment himself. Thou can see the wood how grows out the front line, says Funda. The wood in issue is a Gramterbaum, or deity's wood, an imported kind how is quick growing and aggressive, qualities how include as well gained it the moniker the wood of Hades. My grandpa told, I donged he requirement the wood, it conducted up so lot area. He's very big and the cradle increase via all. He tested to cut out the cradle, fight for year in the wood. This wood is love him, obstinate. He unwillingly recognized it in the end, he solved, okay, it has to be there. It came via the building, ruined the walls and now is portion of the wood building, fair love my grandpa. Photographic politeness of Kalin household.